Alrighty, hey everybody. I'm out at a doctor's appointment, but I'm making you a little tutorial video on how I want you to do this watercolor technique sheet. So here's the deal, my people. You are going to need watercolors, a paintbrush, a cup of water, a ruler, your watercolor technique sheet, and a piece of watercolor paper. Watercolor paper is thicker than regular paper, so that's why it's important that you have it for watercoloring. You will also need a little cup of salt, just a little bit, and a little bit of hand sanitizer. You're gonna put these things in the cups and then bring the cups to your table. The salt and the hand sanitizer is up at the front. Okay, let's get this party started. So the first thing I want for you to do, basically what you're gonna do is copy this sheet onto here. So name, and you could just write Watercolor Techniques. And you might be saying, Miss Polina, why the heck do we have to copy this sheet if it's already printed out? Well, if you try to paint on this paper, let me tell you, it's not gonna work. So we need to make sure that we're painting on the watercolor paper. So you're gonna draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 boxes on your sheet here. They do not need to be perfect. They just need to be 4 rows of 3. You can work alongside me. And my last row. Oops, wow, that's what you get. We're back, people. Okay, so now you're gonna close out these boxes. I recommend using your ruler. I'm just moving quickly because I want to show you guys how to do the rest of this activity. All right. And like I said, yours will look much nicer than mine. So, I'm gonna label them as I go. The first technique is called wet on wet. Let me show you what this means. I'm gonna grab some water. So yes, you will need a cup of water as well. Super important. And I also recommend grabbing a paper towel. So, wet on wet. What is the wet on wet technique? Let me show you. You're gonna take some water and you're gonna wet your square. So no color yet, just make it wet. Next, you're gonna take your water, pick a color, any color. and make sure the paint is nice and wet. And then we're going to put that on top of the wet paper. You can see that it makes a really cool effect. So you could play around with that for a little bit. The next technique we have is wet on dry. Well, what does that mean? That just means we're going to take wet paint and put it on dry paper. So my paper here, nice and dry. I'm going to pick a different color this time. And I'm going to see how the wet paint reacts to the dry paper. Definitely have more control when your paper is dry. You can paint more details, dots, lines. So you could experiment with that for a little bit. Next, we have something called a wash. And a wash is when you make a color, a watercolor specifically, really, really watered down. So you'll pick another color, and this is when you're going to use your tray that's on the other side of the watercolor palette. It's like the opposite side of the lid. You're going to go and make your color really watery by adding and adding and adding water to it. Once it gets super watery, you can put it over here and spread it out, and that is called a wash in watercolor speak. Okay, next we have water drops on wet. And I want you to label these as you go, okay? So water drops on wet. What does that mean? It means we're going to take some wet paint. I'll go for orange. Make sure the paint is super wet, almost like your wash, but a little more strong. And make sure the paint is wet. Then you're going to rinse out your brush. Rinse out your brush completely. And drop plain water into your square. And you can see that it does make a texture. It's very subtle though. Next we have paint drops on wet. That means we're going to wet our page with plain water. If you want to, you could also add a little bit of color. Why not? Make sure it's very wet. And make sure you pick a different color. And you're going to put paint drops on it. So I'm going to drip my paint. Pretty cool. You'll notice that the paint drops spread out. All right, next we have alcohol drops on wet. So check this out. This is where your hand sanitizer is going to come into play. Clean out your brush, pick a color, and make the background, color it in, and make sure that your watercolor is very wet, almost like a wash, but a little bit stronger with your color. And what you're gonna do, rinse out your brush. You're gonna go ahead and dip it right into the hand sanitizer, and you can put dots of hand sanitizer on your watercolor. Kind of cool, right? Who would have thunk? All right, rinse your brush out again. We're about halfway done. The next one is salt on wet. Pick another color. And make sure the watercolor is very wet. Anytime you see the word wet, you want to make sure that you're using a lot of water. And then this is where your little bit of salt is going to come in. You don't need a lot, you just need a pinch. You just need a pinch. And you'll see how it changes the watercolor. Next, we have crayon resist. And let me run and get a crayon. So sorry, forgot to mention, you need a crayon. Any color works. And you're gonna take your crayon and scribble. Just a little bit. One color is fine. Then you're going to take your watercolor, make it pretty wet, and watch that. The crayon resists or repels the watercolor. Next we have paint splatter. And pretty self-explanatory, but here's the best way to make a paint splatter. Pick a color, any color. Make sure your brush is pretty wet with the color. You're gonna use your finger and just tap your brush onto your finger. It kind of got all over the place, but that's okay. We're finally on our last row here. We have blotting with tissue paper. And that's pretty self-explanatory. Pick another color. You can do multiple colors if you want to. And for this, you could just use a paper towel. And you're gonna blot. And you'll see that it picks up some of the texture. Masking tape. You're gonna grab masking tape. Which I also have on the front desk for you. And you're just gonna peel a little piece. And you could put it right in the middle. And what you're gonna do is paint right over it. Paint over it, paint around it. And then you are going to lift it up. can see it creates a nice outline. And last, blend in colors. So to blend your colors really well, you want to start with one color, rinse out your brush, move to another color, mix them together a little bit on your page. And voila, there you have it. So you'll be completing this sheet today. When you are done, you're gonna leave it on the back table. So you're just gonna leave it right on the back table. Make sure it has your name. Make sure it says Watercolor Techniques, 12 boxes. And you're copying this sheet onto the watercolor paper and trying it out. Good luck.